Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary Series 1921. As some of you know who've been watching the previous videos, I'm living at the moment at Hotel Shuts Out, formerly Sanatorium Shuts Out, which is where Dmitri died in 1942, alas, and the hotel is seasonal, so it closes between April and about the middle or toward the end of June. And so today I'm sitting in the bar. It's snowing pretty heavily, even though it's the 24th of April, and it will probably be gone in a couple days. But right now, yeah, it's pretty heavy snow, and it's nice. I'm sitting in the bar, which was not a bar in Dmitri's day. It was a little salon, a smaller salon. You've seen me in the Grand Salon. It was a smaller one for reading. I think this one was divided into a ladies' salon and a reading room. And behind me, you can see doors leading out to what is now called the Snow Beach, where people can come and get food and drinks, and in the summer months and on sunny days in the winter, sit out on lounge chairs and enjoy the fantastic view. Okay, we're up to the 24th of April. A recap: yesterday, Dmitri had a kind of business proposal, not really a proposal, but an old friend of his, Alec Amalakvari, came to him and said that he had a friend who was who'd invented some motor that used only half the fuel that the conventional car engines used at that time. Dmitri was interested. Hopefully he didn't end up putting any money into it. And then he had the usual tea and dinner with Coco. They went to a restaurant in Montmartre, and Dmitri doesn't seem to have been terribly adventurous when it came to restaurants. So, you know, he pretty much went to the Ritz and Pré Catalan, and what was the other place? I can't remember that, but there's another place that he went to all the time, and he didn't very much. So maybe Coco was drawing him out a little bit to try some new things. And he went to the theater with her as well. So today's cast is complicated. We have two very interesting, both rather shady, but really people kind of on opposite poles, by the name of Gorchakov and Loewenstein, or I guess the English pronunciation would be Loewenstein or Loewenstein. And the Witchfelds are back. You remember them, friends of Dmitri and Maria's from London, and also Putyatin's younger brother, Alec, and yeah, a few other people as well. So it's a complicated one. So let's start. It's 24th April 1921, a Sunday in Paris. And Dmitri was living at 76 Rue Miromesnil, which he never tires of telling us. There we go. Mika Gorchakov came to see me in the morning. I don't remember why he came, but it was probably to present some new plan to save the motherland. He's a nice fellow, but awfully loud and unbearable sometimes. We went to church together, after which I lunched at Maria's. Loewenstein was there. He was on his way to London from Africa, where he had spent 3 or 4 months. He was full of the most amazing and enticing stories about hunting and what life is like there. And of course, I found myself once again drawn to places where there is open space and sun. He got frightfully tan and gained weight while he was there. I had tea at Coco's and then dropped by to see the Witchfelds. They had only just returned from America. I dined at Maria's, and then she, Gulia, and I went to the Hotel Majestic to attend a performance by a gypsy choir being in quotation marks here, composed of refugees and not professionals. Gulia's brother Alec participated as a guitarist. He really plays the guitar like a professional, just amazingly excellent. There were masses of people there. Naturally, they were mostly Jews. The performance was relatively successful, but of course there was a sense of great uncertainty in the implementation. After the concert, we went to the Ritz with the Shuvalovs, the Bobrinskys, and some of the performers, and had a really nice time. We got home very late. Okay, so a busy day. And this one in particular raises the topic of where Dmitri stood on what, at that time, he and other people would have called the Jewish question. Relatively speaking, compared to other Romanovs and other Russians, he was pretty friendly toward Jewish people. But that's not to say that there wasn't this sort of baked-in prejudice. And he was kind of straddling the fence a little bit. So, in fact, I'm reading a book right now that he read here at Schatzalp, where the Dutch author was really a crusader against fascism and against anti-Semitism. And yeah, Dmitri was reading that. He frequented the place in town when he was well enough to do so that was anti-Nazi, anti-fascist, and was a welcoming place for Jews. But this first person who comes to see him in the morning, and he doesn't even remember what, he was probably writing this, after about 2 weeks had passed. He doesn't even remember what this man wanted to talk to him about. This was Mikha Gorchakov. It's worth saying a little bit about him. So both in the case of Mikha Gorchakov and Alfred Loewenstein, I actually want to quote from my own notes. Gorchakov, Prince Mikhail Konstantinovich, was a little older than Dmitri. He was 11 years older than Dmitri. He was a right-wing ideologue and publisher who believed the world was in the grip of a Jewish Masonic conspiracy and embraced the idea of Holy Rus. He founded the right-wing publishing house Doloi Zlo, so like Down with Evil would be a simple translation of that. So he founded this publishing house in Paris in the 1920s, and it operated through the 1930s. And among the books it published was the infamous Protocols of the Elders of Zion that caused so much trouble at the time and continues to cause trouble today. And he published that in 1927, so he hadn't done that yet. The liberal journal, Golos Rassi, The Voice of Russia, which was also published in Paris, accused Gorchakov in 1922, so about a year after this diary entry, of having raised 500,000 francs toward, quote, a terrorist act, unquote, against Alexander Kerensky and Pavel Milyukov. So, Kerensky and Milyukov were both people that Dmitri had contact with and had, favorable contact with, whom he himself connected with, made an effort to connect with, and sought help from and advice. So I can absolutely guarantee you that Dmitri would not have supported any such action. But apparently it was an allegation, and I don't know if it was true or not. Anyway, this was, as you can see, a rather shady person. But, he'd been a friend of Dmitri's from before the revolution, and aside from sometimes being loud and annoying, he was pleasant enough. He was nice to Dmitri. So there's that. And then next, he went to have lunch at Maria's, and there he found Alfred Loewenstein, or Loewenstein, I should say. He was Belgian, so I'm not sure how they would pronounce that in Belgium. And he and Maria and Gulia had been very close friends of Loewenstein and his wife in London, which was where Loewenstein lived primarily. And again, I don't know how that friendship came up. I don't know if it was through Maria or how they got mixed up with these people, but they were, Loewenstein, I know nothing about his wife except that Dmitri hit on her and she seemed to be into it. And that was always a problem. If you were a man, a married man, and Dmitri was your friend, it just kind of came with the territory that at some point he was going to hit on your wife. Anyway, there was that. It doesn't, just like with the Marlings, it doesn't seem to have affected the relationship with the husband. So why do I say the Loewensteins were, or Loewenstein himself was an unsavory person? Well, I don't know. Those of you who are in Britain will be familiar with Robert Maxwell, this sort of psychopath, scam artist, businessman in Britain who ended up falling off a yacht, whether he fell off, jumped off, or was pushed off. Nobody was ever able to determine, but his business had taken a turn for the worse when that happened. And Loewenstein's, he was also an immigrant to Russia, to England. And so Loewenstein's story reminds me very much. He was like the prototype of Robert Maxwell. He went by the nickname Pasha, which Dmitri never explains. There doesn't seem to have been a Russian connection. He was in his 40s at this time. He was a Belgian financier. He was Jewish, but a convert to Roman Catholicism. And it was thought that he made his fortune as a war speculator. He amassed a fortune during the First World War, and especially he had a lucrative contract with the British government for the manufacture of artificial silk, which was used in aviation at that time. And, that could have been on the level, but apparently he was also a war speculator and just raked in the money. After the war, his fortune increased greatly through holdings in the artificial silk industry, as well as hydroelectric power. And the thing about Alfred Loewenstein is that he was what you would call a predatory businessman or a predatory capitalist. He would go in and take over something like a hydroelectric power business and outmaneuver the owner and do a hostile takeover when he didn't give a damn about whatever it was, whether it was, power or artificial silk. He just wanted to milk it for all it was worth and then sell it, turn a tidy profit. He and his wife struggled, mostly in vain, to gain acceptance in high society. They weren't welcomed by the British aristocracy, who saw right through them, rather like with Robert Maxwell. He had a successful thoroughbred stable and was himself a keen horseman with a private hunting lodge in Leicestershire. And Dmitri was a guest there. Both Dmitri and Maria and Gulia were guests there very frequently when they were living in London. Let's see, what else? In 1926, he founded International Holdings and Investments Limited. He loaned Dmitri 35,000 French francs in 1920 and helped him invest a little in artificial silk, but that doesn't seem to have amounted to anything. His wife was named Madeline or Magdalene, and she was called Didi. And so a few years after this, 7 years after this diary entry, on a little over 7 years, on 4th July 1928, he fell from his private plane while crossing the English Channel en route to Belgium. And as with Maxwell, it's not certain whether this was suicide, whether it was murder, or whether it was purely a mistake. The official story was that he'd been trying to open the lavatory door, but he mistook the cabin door for the lavatory door and was sucked out of the plane, but neither murder or suicide were ever ruled out. And the thing that makes it ironic that Dmitri saw Gorchakov and Loewenstein in the same day was that modern day anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists accuse Loewenstein of having been involved in arms dealing and the establishment of the international narcotics trade, likewise characterizing his Leicestershire house parties as depraved orgies. Well, Dmitri was never present for any depraved orgies, so I don't think any of that is true. But if there was anything untoward going on at the Loewenstein's place, it was Dmitri and Didi. But no depraved orgies, at least while Dmitri was there. So if you want to read him, there's a book called The Man Who Fell from the Sky by William Norris. And there's also a series that was in Collier's Weekly from March to April 1929 called The Life and Death of Alfred. Who Traveled Alone? The Life and Death of Alfred Loewenstein. Definitely an interesting figure, and of course the kind of person that you want in a novel, although I'm not that excited about it. Okay, so I've probably spent too much time with that. Forgive me. But what I find interesting about this is that you see, not in relation to Gorchakov and Loewenstein, but that you see how emigre culture was starting to blossom. It wasn't that long ago that Dmitri and Maria weren't doing anything like this with the emigre community, and all of a sudden they're hanging out with Chevalas and Bobrinskys and other Russian aristocrats, and they're doing things like going to this concert given by refugees, so not necessarily people who were Romani or Roma, not actual gypsies, which is why Dmitri puts it in quotes. They're Russian refugees who had grown up with probably and loved gypsy music and were able to perform it. And one of them was Gulya's little brother. Why? So then Dmitri makes this curious statement. Of course, naturally they were mostly Jews. Masses of people there, naturally they were mostly Jews. And why that would be the case, I have no idea. Why he bothers to note that, I have no idea. But I guess on the face of it, it's more or less a neutral statement. There was always sort of that mix with him. There was one occasion in 1920 when he was invited to a party. There was a woman that he liked, and she invited him to a party, and she was Jewish, and the party was almost exclusively Jewish members of society, and Dmitri liked it. He had a great time. He said it was one of the best parties he'd ever been to, but then, he has to get in his disparaging comment, well, I sure did see a lot of big noses, that sort of thing. And yet he had such a great time. So there you go. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. Yeah, what next? Well, if Dmitri was impressed by Alec Putyatin's guitar playing, then that was a big compliment, because Dmitri was an accomplished guitar player himself. What do we have next time? Well, another discussion with Galievsky about Kirill, so it's always interesting when that happens. And yeah, a meeting with a woman who hasn't popped up before in the diaries as far as I can recall. Sorry that I've been so long-winded today. I wish you could see the snow coming down, but I tried in front of a few windows and the light just makes it impossible with my primitive photographic skills. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.